Okay, for anybody that's new, I do record these and put them on Facebook. So if you don't want to be, I'm sorry, on YouTube, if you don't want to be seen, just turn off your video. Do we have anybody new for this time? Oh, okay. So you're all back, all gluttons for punishment. Goodness gracious. Well, let me get started here. I have the PowerPoint. So let's see, share screen, PowerPoint, and there we go. Everybody see the title slide? Ah,
Yep.
what technology is great. What I'm going to be doing today is covering a bunch of things across Southern California. For those of us that live out here, we know the weather's great, so people tend to come out here for vacations. Some of them come out here and stay forever. Yours truly. Um, and we've had the history of things across Southern California for theme parks of all different types. So a bunch of these are totally gone, exist only in the history books or in photos. Some have been greatly modified or changed over time. So I'm not going to go primarily to the ones that are still big there today. We're not going to visit Knott's Berry Farm. We're not going to go visit Disneyland. But I'm going to try to take a look at some of the forgotten ones. Some of them are more popular. We mentioned before the talk started about Pacific Ocean Park. Some of these have a real fan base or history to them, and others are kind of forgotten. I want to start with one of the real forgotten ones, Bernheimer's Japanese Gardens. Um, there were two brothers that made a fortune in the cotton milling business. They were Adolf and Eugene Bernheimer, and they went off and decided that they were going to build this Japanese garden. And it's now for folks out here in LA. They built two of them. The first one is now the Yamashiro restaurant above Hollywood. That was their first house that they built. Eugene died in 1924, and his brother sold the house up there and decided he was going to build another Japanese garden, and it was out in Pacific Palisades. And it was just a truly beautiful spot. He had built these. This is a miniature pagoda that was in the center of it. When we get to the present day view, just remember a big semicircle with a moat around it. But he had, this was where he lived. He amassed a massive collection of Japanese art, really went big into bronze pieces. He also had inside the buildings things like wooden lacquered hats and hundreds of these different things he had bought. And for a while, it was just his house. He just lived up there, wandered through the gardens, but eventually people started trying to convince him to open it to the public. And it was interesting. If you read vintage stories from the time, Adolf and Eugene were avowed woman haters and at first avowed that no woman would ever set foot in their house. But eventually, the public convinced them to open this up for public tours. And you could come out and walk around the grounds. They had different pieces of art. Uh, quite a collection, and there were over 2 million people that went and visited the gardens. This was a particularly famous piece that he had gotten into a bidding war with a guy that owned the Wanamaker department stores, and he eventually got it. So you could wander through these grounds. Everything was going great. Had a wonderful view of the ocean, looking up PCH, which was known as Roosevelt Highway at the time. But unfortunately, 1941 comes along. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and owning a Japanese garden was not the most popular thing you could do. So Bernheimer Japanese Gardens kind of closed in late 41, early 42. Mr. Bernheimer died in 1944, and the property sat there in great dispute what was going to happen to it. This is where it is today. I mentioned earlier the big circle up in the rated area that I did there. You can see a semicircle. That's where those pagodas were. If you look right below the red area, you can see landslides down to PCH. And there's in 1951, the newspaper articles were full of different dispute on whether or not that whole hillside was going to come down or not. The Bernheimer house was still up there. There were still people living in it. There was talk about turning it into a home for wayward youth, putting up there. But 1951, they gave up trying to do much with it, decided that the hill was potentially unstable. They sold off the property. I don't know if the people that live in the Pacific Garden Apartments know it's unstable, but his artwork collection was dispersed in 1951, and now the Bernheimer Japanese Gardens is all gone. We're going to hop over to Griffith Park Zoo. That's not gone. Of course, everybody knows there is a zoo, but this is not the zoo that we went to today. This is a zoo that was built in 1921. It was shut down in 1966 because they felt it was basically inhumane to the animals living there. And we had this typical thing. You could go and see the seals, bears. If you look at this, you can realize there's not one piece of greenery or anything for these animals to live in. Everything was cages, everything was stonework, it was iron. There was just nothing for them to go and be able to get any sort of comfort there. So again, the leopards here, all in iron cages, pretty much not the most congenial of places. Well, the old zoo was abandoned in 1966, and for whatever reason, they did not tear it down, but it's still there today. It's been used in a whole bunch of movies. Dragnet movie they made years ago with Dan Aykroyd, a whole bunch of TV shows and that. And you can go out to Griffith Park and go visit it. And if you want to try to figure out where it is, there's the Griffith Park carousel off to the right. And up in the hills above there, they actually, inside some of the animal cages today, have picnic tables. So you can go in and sit there where the lions and tigers and bears used to be. So again, interesting that for whatever reason, it never tore it down. It had been forgotten for years. And then people would go up there, graffiti the heck out of it and everything. And then the city finally decided they could do something with it. It was cheaper to clean it up and turn it into a picnic grove than it was to tear down all that massive stone and iron work. Alvera Street, again, still there today. I just thought people that go there today and see all the tourist trap stuff that's sold out there today might realize it was a different thing, a much more authentic street in 1938. They had all sorts of old carts and things that had been used in real actual farms and haciendas in the area. Of course, back then, people still went off and bought their knickknacks, but it was a different world. And it's been a popular spot. The 50s, it started becoming a kind of go-to spot for tourists coming out, being so close to the train station. Then they started bringing street musicians and that. So Alvera Street's still there today, but today it's much more of a sanitized market type environment than any of the historical stuff that they used to have out there. So I just love all the 60s tourist wives coming out there to buy their stuff. Corriganville, kind of interesting. If you're into Western movies, when I first moved out here to Los Angeles, I got a real kick of seeing the hills out above this particular area, recognizing all the rocks and that were in all the old Lone Ranger movies and that. So Corriganville was a ranch that was actually used for many, many movies. They shot a lot of John Wayne movies out there. They shot Tarzan movies. They did all sorts of stuff out there. And one of the cowboys, Crash Corrigan, decided he was going to go and buy this piece of property, kind of stitch these together to show the entrance. And he built himself a little theme park out in Simi Valley. And it turned out to be quite a success. There were more people going to this thing back in this period of time than you can imagine. And there was no 118 highway. So everybody had to go out on the old Santa Susana Road. But they were getting 50, 60,000 people a day out there at times to go to Corriganville. It was quite an operation. So here's a vintage postcard. There was a whole Western town. There were underwater scenes where you could have Johnny Weissmuller as Tarzan fighting the crocodiles or whatever, and they could film underwater there. They did Robin Hood movies out there. A map of the property, again, a huge area. Up in the upper left, you could see an arena where they did stage shows. They had kept the sets for a lot of the movies, so you could go to the sets that John Wayne had walked on for Fort Apache. If anybody remembers the TV show Rin Tin Tin, the little kid that had joined the cavalry, Kendall's waving. That was all shot out there, and you could go walk through. Actually, it was shooting when Corriganville was open, and you could go out there and watch them shooting the different TV shows, or when they weren't shooting, you could run around them yourselves. So it's a whole Western town, very authentic. And then in the late 60s, Bob Hope bought the property. Bob Hope at one point was the largest single landholder in the state of California. He took all the money he made from selling Pepsodent toothpaste and stuff and bought land. And he bought Corriganville, renamed it Hopetown, sold off most of it for development as housing. Then a massive fire came through, wiped out Corriganville, and basically all that's left out there are these bases for the houses. But it's a really nice park. They rebuilt Corriganville for part of the movie that was recently done about Hollywood. The one this was redone. It looked like the Span Ranch. But if you know the 118, it's going through the very top corner, the picture top right, the Santa Ana train tunnel, and the barren part in the dead center is where the western town used to be. Again, if you look up to that circular drive up there, that's where the arena area used to be that they did the stage shows. But if you do live in the area and it's not a hot day, it's a really nice park to walk through. You can park your car down, walk through it. There's actual caves you can climb into up there. Lots of remnants of some of the old buildings. People a number of years ago put up historical markers showing, what was shot here, what, back when. So if you're in the area, Corriganville is a fun spot to go visit. Magic Mountain opened in 1971. For those that live up in the area, I think Carol and I think we're 15 miles from Magic Mountain, and we don't go very often. We did when the kids were young. But the Magic Mountain that's there today is way different from the Magic Mountain that was there when it first opened. First of all, there was nothing growing out there. This is the roller coaster, the Gold Rusher roller coaster, which now today is a nice ride. It goes through a bunch of trees and it's kind of scenic and everything. But back in 1972, it was barren. Just not much there of anything. They used huge parts of the property for things that are just totally gone. These bumper boats. Disneyland had the flying saucers that didn't work too well. Magic Mountain had these boats and they worked about equally as well. But you get out there and the idea was, it was like bumper cars on boats. You'd go around, bump into each other. And then this wall, just like at Disneyland, this wall would come by, swoop you all into the corner, and then you could all get out. So very popular ride, but I think most people got out there and just bobbed around and waited for the wall to come and bring them back. But for those of us that live out here, you might get a real kick out of looking how barren and empty the area is around it. Just nothing out there. Today you go out, there's all sorts of shopping centers and other things that are built out there. Back then, there was next to nothing. There's the 5 stretching across the top hand side of it. Big lakes, ponds, all sorts of things out there. And again, just really barren in this particular point in time. So this is a funicular railroad. You would ride from the bottom up to the top. You could go visit the observation tower. I got a kick out of this. Rich Little in 1972. He's out there performing. They had a theater and they brought in all sorts of big name acts. And in 72, Rich Little was a big name star. So today it's all roller coasters and theme, scary rides and that sort of thing. But in 1972, they had quite a thing going on for nighttime entertainment to bring the family out and have Hollywood stars come out. The log flume ride, super popular ride out there. Unfortunately, I believe that's been gone a couple of years now. They didn't want to pay the money to maintain it. And here's some souvenir slides that are kind of fun to look at. Valencia Falls, really great, massive waterfall, of course, totally man-made. And this is where they ended up putting in the looping roller coaster, the first one that was done. We have, of course, the boats again, which had their own name, El Bumpos. The log jammer ride again. A monorail, because every place has to have a monorail. You had a little sailboat ride, which looked absolutely thrilling. It just was like their version of Pirates, a water flume, water pushed you through it, and you went through it with not much of anything happening. A skyway, because every theme park, of course, has to have a skyway. I got a kick out of this. Their version of the Grand Prix Autopia that we all know from the Disney parks. Looks like very realistic for LA because it's totally jammed up with traffic, but didn't have much of a ride, but at least they had some vegetation here. And this one I got a kick out of, Dancing Waters. It was synchronized music and the fountains done at night, obviously. And if you go out there today, this is where Hurricane Harbor is. So all the water park and everything, they tore the Dancing Waters out and put Hurricane Harbor in. Then we hop over to Busch Gardens. For those of us that are beer drinkers, Busch Gardens was great because you got to go and see beer made, and at the end of it, you got to drink it and see how it was. So, for those of us in Southern California today, as we drive on the 5, you'll look over to the buildings and recognize the Budweiser factory, and you can smell the Budweiser factory when you go by. And when they first started tours, you'd actually walk through the brewery, so you could see all the giant tanks that they were making the beer in. You could see the various facilities, but they started getting more and more people. Either they were interested in seeing beer made or they were interested in the free beer at the end, but they had so many people they just couldn't take them through the factory anymore. So they actually put a monorail system in place, and you would go and this was all free. It was really great at first. You would go park your car, walk across the street, get on one of these monorails, ride through the factory, and at the end you came out and there were beautiful gardens. You could go and get a free beer. Theoretically, you're supposed to get 2 of them, but I think people found out you could get more than 2, so it became a popular spot. As I mentioned, free at first, but then Bush decided that, hey, we're getting more and more people. It's costing us a lot of money to give away this beer. How about if we started charging an admission fee? And the same amount of people kept coming and coming and coming. So they started expanding the park. So it's hard for people to look at this today if you go by the area and realize this was beautiful downtown Van Nuys, California. They had these lakes. You could take bird shows. They had trained birds. They had the bird from Beretta that would come out and visit. Again, this is all Van Nuys. Boat rides through the grounds. They had incredible flocks of birds out there. And they decided then, let's go the whole theme park route. Besides just having birds and things to look at, let's build us a theme park. So they invented old St. Louis, since that's where Anheuser-Busch had been founded, and it added this section onto the park. And to get to this section, I'll show you pictures at the end, you had to cross a bridge from the bird section of the park into the amusement section of the park. And you had they put restaurants in there. This was a bumper car ride. In the background, you could see all sorts of booths that you could win stuffed animals, different odds and ends. So they really tried to make a go of this and compete on its own. It didn't last. It was interesting. The red area here is what was all Busch Gardens and the bird sanctuary at the time. If you look over to the right, you have the 405 freeway, Roscoe Boulevard running across. And it was interesting that it got doomed by 2 things. It became pretty expensive to operate, but also beer became much more popular, and they started needing the space to build more brewing facilities. So they decided Busch Gardens was going to end. They took it out. Carol and I were there right near the end of it, one of the last nights it operated, and went into the gift shop when we were buying stuff because everything was like 70% off or whatever. And I took out my wallet to pay for something, and I had my Disney credit card sitting in it. And the guy was not at all happy that I worked for Disney, but because Disney had killed us. And I said, well, no, I didn't do it. I didn't have anything to do with it. But it was interesting. It wasn't that Disney killed it. It was the fact that Budweiser could make a lot more money with beer. And I mentioned a bridge. It's still there today. It's very strange. That was a bridge that took you from the bird sanctuary at the top down to the bottom where old St. Louis was. And for whatever reason, they never tore that bridge out. So if you drive in the area and drive on Woodley and look over, there's this giant, massive concrete bridge sitting on pillars, no way to get to it from either end, and it's the only visible remnant of Busch Gardens that's still there. Then we're going to hop across town to Marineland of the Pacific. This was, as you can imagine, an aquatic park. This is the year it opened. It was kind of interesting. Open up a park, well, it's still sort of under construction, lots of dirt and barren hills. But this was a great spot. Marineland in Florida had been a popular theme park, and they decided that Marineland of the Pacific should do equally well. And it did for quite a while. It was a very popular park. Here it is a year later after they allowed the things to grow in. But you had all sorts of animal acts. You had the killer whale shows. Here, the guy's getting ready to feed one of the killer whales. These tanks were added on for additional shows over time. You could get a ride. Well, you couldn't. The guy that worked there could get a ride on the back of the whales. They did all sorts of performances with them, and I think they were called Corky and Orky, if I remember right. Well, the park did well, and it got sold to a variety of different developers over the years. And then it was the folks that owned the SeaWorld bought it. And all of a sudden, one day, took all the animals out, closed it all down, and announced they were going to come back and refurbish it. And they never refurbished it. It got torn out, and I get a kick here. You could listen to the dolphins talk. Um, it got torn out, and today this is where it exists. They developed this. I'll mispronounce it. This resort out there. It sat out there for about 12, 14 years, totally empty. Talk about bringing it back, not bringing it back, and they finally tore it out. And again, pretty much no sign of it. A few paths along the mountains, the cliff tops are all that left. But for those of us who lived out here, Marineland was a great spot to visit. And I got some great pictures of me, my folks, Carol out there visiting it. Unfortunately, all gone today. Now we're going to hop down. We're going all over the Southern California freeways, and we're not getting stuck in traffic because everybody's stuck home in quarantine. Movieland Wax Museum at one point was the largest wax museum in the entire world, even bigger than Madame Tussauds or anything. It was down in Buena Park. Buena Park seemed to be the mecca of theme parks. You had, of course, Knott's Berry Farm. You had Movieland Wax Museum, Movie World, Cars of the Stars. We'll go there too. And then we've had medieval times, all sorts of things down in Buena Park. So this was a great one. The guy that owned it was kind of a character. He had this fleet of Rolls Royces, and they would drive around town with the different characters in it. And you can imagine if you're sitting on the freeway and all of a sudden Frankenstein goes by in a chauffeured limousine. The museum started with a whole bunch of old Hollywood characters. You had, Rudolph Valentino as a Sheik. You had the ones from Gone with the Wind. This was one I got a kick out of. This is a souvenir slide, William Powell and Myrna Loy from The Thin Man. And it's a pretty good one. You got the dog Asta down at the bottom, and they're trying to sort this out. So this was a souvenir slide from Panaview. If everybody remembers that company, they sold these kind of square formatted slides. Well, look at the next slide, which was done by another souvenir slide company. I get a real kick out of this. I mean, they went right through William Powell's head. It's just, why on earth would you do such a bad job of selling a souvenir? Imagine you buy this thing, you get home, you look at it, and as a photographer, this slide just drives me crazy. I mean, when you see how well this one's formatted and how badly that one is. But what happened over time was they started inviting celebrities to participate in, here's the Little Rascals. They started inviting celebrities to participate in having their own statues done. So it became a big thing for some of the stars to come out there. They would donate their actual clothes. They would sit there and pose for the artists, so they didn't have to just do it from photos. And they would have charity premieres that if you were, say, Dan Blocker and your character was being unveiled, your favorite charity would come out, have a night at Movieland, raise funds for your charity, and then your statue would be put on display out there. So a huge success for a while, and then wax museums kind of fell out of favor. The building and the land also became worth a fortune out there, so it got sold off. And that's kind of what also happened to Movie World. There was another theme park out there with it was started, a guy had this huge collection of cars. He rented them out to the motion picture industry, and he would just keep them when it was done after a movie. So he had a bunch of, say, police cars from the 1940s. He would have all sorts of different ones. And he started buying these cars, and they were stacked all around the Hollywood area. People said, you ought to put these on display, charge money to see them. So he went down to Movie World, bought the building, put these cars in there, and then he started buying movie props. And I don't know if Mike Clark, are you on the call today? If you are, speak up, because I'm going to embarrass you. I told him he was going to be embarrassed, so he might not have shown up. But I was a big fan of the TV show Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And I had heard that they had the Seaview, the submarine. This thing is 17 feet or 19 feet long on display. And I had ran into some other folks. I felt like an episode of The Big Bang Theory. Is at a comic book store. Somehow the subject of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea came up. Somebody else said, oh, I'm a fan of it. It's at the Movie World, and a bunch of us all decided to go down to Buena Park next weekend and go see it. So we went down. There's my buddy Mike, and when he ended up having this in his garage for about 5 years as somebody was restoring it. But we had gone down. We were talking. There was a magazine at the time called Starlog, and we were saying, "I wonder why Starlog's never written a magazine article about Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea." So I wrote to Starlog, asked them that. They wrote back, because nobody's ever done one. Why don't you? So Mike and I sat down. We went and interviewed Irwin Allen, the various stars of the series, and ended up doing about 30 different things for Starlog over the years. So we also had cars, as I mentioned. This was one of my favorites from the movie The Great Race with Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, Natalie Wood. This was Professor Fate's car, the Hannibal 8, the Leslie Special off to the left. Mike, again, I'm going to have to embarrass him with the tape of this. This was Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet. You could actually just walk right up to these things, and if you were so inclined, could actually climb up and sit on the props and stuff. Well, the museum closed later this year, I think not because Mike abused it too much or anything, but they were offered such a fortune for the land that the collection was sold off, and the cars were sold off in a number of auctions. Now, we all know about going to Universal for tours, but back in 1967, I don't know the year it started, I don't know the year it ended, but 20th Century Fox sold tours of their back lot. So you could come on and walk around and go right onto the sets. This wasn't done like Universal with trams riding around. You'd walk up to this old riverboat. You could come out to Peyton Place. That you could had cutouts of the stars, so you could see, who was being filmed there at any particular time. You could walk right into this, all fake snow, of course, in Southern California. The sign there is about, it's a historical marker, Peyton Place Pillory. This was one, again, I wish Mike was here, the Chariot from Lost in Space. You could just walk out and climb up into these movie props, all sorts of things scattered across the grounds. And again, there was a thing that they did for a number of years. They realized the tours were getting in the way of making movies, so they stopped it. But for a while, you could wander through Warner Brothers. They had a little tour like this. Universal had the big tour, and different studios were trying to make some money on it. Mentioned earlier, Pacific Ocean Park was there a relatively short period of time, but it was a very large amusement park built out on a pier out into the ocean at Santa Monica. Looking down here, we see the Santa Monica Pier that's there today, although it looks way, way different today. No giant Ferris wheel or anything. And in the background, you see a second pier that you will not see today, and that was Pacific Ocean Park. So huge park out there, roller coaster. I was reading last night somebody's recollection of this roller coaster on how he loved roller coasters, but how he got sick every time he went on this one. And other people in this roller coaster group were all commenting about it because it took you right up to the edge of the ocean. And not only did you have the height of the roller coaster, but now you had the additional height from the pier down to the water. And everybody said it was a particularly vertigo-inducing experience. But you had a midway area that you could walk out. Well, this is, again, I found this interesting. This is the year it opened. And look already how much rust and barnacles or whatever are building up on that piece of metal out there. And that was one of the big reasons that Pacific Ocean Park had huge problems, is that building anything in a saltwater environment is a very expensive proposition to try to keep this thing going. So that's only 1 year old and already having some severe signs of decay. But they had all these various rides. You could go out, you get a funhouse ride on the left, where traditional funhouse thing, get in a little car, go in and get scared. Tilt-a-wheels, roller coasters, all sorts of things. This, if you're a fan of the TV show The Man from U.N.C.L.E., they had an episode where they're trying to follow the bad guy. He gets into one of these things, they go all the way out there, and then a speedboat picks him up at the end and races him off. But they love to film shows out there. The Fugitive, some of these others were all done at there. Unfortunately, they had lost money. The place got shut down. They had fires. They had all sorts of problems. And now there's just a very few pieces of it sticking out of the ground at low tide. You can see some markers. Japanese Deer Park. You used to drive down to Disneyland, look over to the right and see the signs. Well, actually, let me take a look at the sign for the Japanese Deer Park, another Buena Park specialty. And it was down there. They had, again, deer, the typical thing. Somebody had gone to Japan, seen how popular parks were in Japan, that people love to feed deer. This is one of my favorite pictures. Doesn't a deer look like he's laughing? I mean, he's like, "Hey, sucker, you paid money to come in here and feed me, so the guy that owns the place doesn't have to." But they had all these deer. You could wander around the grounds, feed them, and just pet them and spend as much time as you wanted. You could go to the koi pond. The women would pose in their kimonos and their parasols. They had dance groups that would perform out there. You could go and look at the Akita puppies, Japanese dogs. Now, of course, they had to have a dolphin. I think that was the Theme Park Act of 1952. Every theme park at that time had to have a dolphin. They had bird shows. They had animal shows of different training. You could go out there and watch the trained bears, a whole pit of these things. You could learn Japanese crafts, or you could go for the ever famous shoot the shogun warriors and the kabuki dancers and everything else. So this was there for a number of years. It closed down. Another guy tried to bring it back as Enchanted Village, lasted just 1 year, didn't make it. If you're on the 5 today, this is the area. The triangle was where the Japanese Deer Park was. Very sad to see when the sign came down, it was gone. It was a kind of tranquil little spot, but again, no sign whatsoever that that theme park ever existed. Farmers Market's not really a theme park, but for those of us who live out here today that go to the Grove, I preferred it back when it was the original farmers market. They actually sold things like in a farmers market. I kind of got a kick to walk through because there were all these different things that, you know, Carol will always say, I always eat the exact same things. You know, you ate what your mother cooked. My mother cooked the exact same things all the time. Going to the farmer's market was kind of neat because you'd see all these different things. Our son is a real gourmet chef, and he'd go to markets and he'll find things that look cool, and then he'll come home and find a recipe, what to do with them. So farmer's market of the old days was actually a whole different experience today. They also had the small shops that weren't the big things. I mean, you go out to the Grove today and it's all brand name stores and everything. Well, these were all small mom and pop shops that were out there. A patio area you could go eat. And I don't think there's any root beer floats in this one, Debbie, but I could get a strawberry shortcake for only 50 cents. So the farmer's market was kind of neat spot, old time go. And you might just as well run into some celebrities there. As a friend of mine named Mark Evanier has a great story about running to Mel Torme there. That's
Bill,
yeah.
part of farmers market is still there. It's a lot smaller than it used to be, but there still are some of the things that they used to have.
Yeah, it's still there, but it's become a lot more sanitized.
Well, okay.
Yeah, it's still. I get a kick out of, you know, what it was. The Grove to me is just cookie cutter. You know, it's another shopping mall type experience. So Lion Country Safari, Laguna Hills. The thing here was you would get in your own car, drive through this area, and there were all sorts of animals that were out there. You know, ostriches. You could go through another section and you have lions out there, different things. Carol and I did one of these in England about it was about 3 years ago, I guess, and we were driving through it, and you drive up to this one gate and it says, if you want to drive through where the monkeys are, you can drive through where the monkeys are, or you could go the other way because the monkeys might rip your car apart. Well, we figured it was a rental. We drove through where the monkeys were, and it was very strange trying to drive your car with a monkey butt sitting right in the front of the middle of the windshield, and they were just all over the place. So, but this was down there. You could go drive around and see it. They had their version of the Autopia. You could go in little jungle jeeps. You could go in the Rent a Hippo ride and go motoring around. I got a kick out of this. I didn't realize this was actually a water fountain that was not unique just to Lion Country Safari, that you could buy these and they were scattered around the country. And a lot of Lions clubs bought these and put these in town parks all across the United States. So that if you went to, you know, say Cotterville, you would walk up and there'd be a water fountain with a little sign courtesy of the Lions Club. So I had spotted this at Lion Country Safari, then I spotted it in something place like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, looked into it, and it was actually a company that specialized in making lion-shaped water fountains for the Lions Club. So you could also go and buy all your souvenirs and everything. I actually, in our guest room, the walls are decorated with these felt pennants from all around the country, because whenever I traveled, I would buy one of these felt pennants, put it up in the wall. Moved out here to California, got more of them. So the guest room is my virtual shrine to places I have been over the years. Again, real estate became very valuable. As everybody knows, Irvine, Laguna Hills, that whole area, it became very built up. Whatever money the company was making and running this particular operation, it was very expensive, as you can imagine, feeding all the lions. They also had some problems every now and then. Some of the animals would escape, and people would be calling, "There's a lion in my backyard." They eventually closed down the animal portion of the park. They put in a water park. The water park is now closed and is looking for a new home. It's supposedly going to end up down at the great park they're building down there in Orange County. But that's, again, totally gone. It's not seen today. A couple just real miscellaneous shots. This one, if anybody knows Southern California and can identify that hill with that tower on it, I'd appreciate it. This midget racing was real popular in Southern California back in the 1930s. So people would build these cars, race them, sometimes with kids in them like you see here, sometimes adults. But midget racing was a real popular thing all throughout the Southern California area. There was actually big prize money in it, and quite a following of people that ran around and did the midget racing. So I ended up with these pictures in the same batch that I ended up with the Griffith Park pictures from 1938. Like I said, if anybody happens to recognize it, I'd love to know where they are. Macarthur Park, famous song, left a cake out in the rain. Well, today you can go out there and rent a paddle boat or kayaks, but back in the 50s, you could actually rent motorboats and go zipping around MacArthur Park in a motorboat. Today, I don't know how safe I would feel, going out and spending time. That the water is a little polluted and the park's not in the best part of town. But I got a kick out of how tranquil and everything looked in Los Angeles in the 1950s. We had all sorts of crazy architecture. Brown Derby restaurant. I might do a talk one of the days on crazy LA architecture, but I just thought people might get a kick out of how silly LA was back at the time. NBC Tour. I got a kick out of this. I love watching the old Tonight shows. It's a thing on MTV or MeTV. And the other night, Johnny Carson was talking about the NBC tour, and that when they moved out here, it was $1 to take a tour of NBC. And my goodness, now it's up to $3. What on earth are those bean counters thinking? $3 for the tour. And it was great because you could walk in, take the tour, and see, when the Tonight Show was done, the Bob Hope specials, game shows, all sorts of things. So NBC is no longer there. They no longer give tours. It's still a production facility, but NBC moved up the hill to the NBC Universal lot. But that was a popular spot to go to. That area in front behind the red car was always filled during the afternoon with everybody lined up to go into to see the Today Show, the Tonight Show. And Carson always be talking about how hot it was, how cold it was, how wet it was. Didn't matter. It was always jammed with people trying to get in there. If you've been to Travel Town at Griffith Park, it was really different back in the 60s. It actually had a giant collection of airplanes. That P-40 painted up like the flying tigers in the front there. Back in the 60s, nobody gave any thought to these things. Kids would climb over the fence. They'd take their picture sitting in the cockpit of these things. That plane today would be worth well over $1 million. At one point, the city realized what a fortune it had in antique airplanes, World War II planes, Korean War planes, and they sold them off. So when I first went out there, the planes were still there, and being an airplane nut, I had a great time. But that's changed time. And then Carol wasn't going to be expecting this, but she gets to be a guest star now because Santa's Village was in Sky Forest, California. It operated from 55 to 98, shut down, sat there for years and years and years with talk it was going to come back. And amazingly, in 2016, it did reopen. And if you look at their website, they are planning on being open again now for a limited operation with the virus. But I just thought we'd take a look here from 1988. And it's too bad she's not on the call because I'd embarrassed the heck out of our daughter, Margot. She's exploring Santa's Village. There's Carol and Margot having a great time wandering through the area in the background. And yours truly and Margot taking a train ride. So that was it, a look at some of what was around in Southern California at the time. For anybody that's new, the schedule each week is at worldsfairphotos.com/Zoom. Next week, we'll be looking at Disneyland. the second 5 years. So we're going to be going from 1960 to 1964, since people seem to enjoy the first 5 years at Disneyland. And then we might be doing the first 5 of Disney World, or we might be doing the 1984 Knoxville Fair, or we'll see where we go from there. So that's it. Let me stop sharing. And hope folks enjoyed looking back around Southern California back the way that it was.
Very good. Can I mention, this is Werner Weiss, can I mention 4 other attractions in Orange County?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Werner.
I'm sure there's a lot more than 4 in Southern California. One was Movie Land of the Air Museum at Orange County Airport, not to be confused with the Movie World, Cars of the Stars, and Planes of Fame. And so that was right on the airport, and they had quite a collection of antique planes there too. And I've never researched the history of it. I still have some old brochures from it, so I'm interested in, and I went there as a kid a number of times.
Yeah, that was a collection that was started by Paul Tallmans.
Frank Tallman and Paul Mantz.
Yeah. Right. They had they did all like the B-25s from Catch-22 movie. They if you guys remember the movie It's a Mad World, the guy flies through a billboard, did all sorts of stuff. They had that huge collection of airplanes out there, and same sort of thing is with Cars of the Stars and others. People said, everybody wants to come out here and see it, why don't you make some money off it? And he had at one point the world's largest collection of warbirds anywhere in the world that he had just bought for all these. He had a great business model. He would go to the studio and they'd want to make a movie, and he'd go, buy me the plane, I'll restore it, I'll fly it for you if I get to keep it at the end. And then he'd park it out back and he'd use it in somebody else's movie. And that's how he built up this giant air force. MGM would buy an airplane, he'd restore it, fly it. Warner's would buy an airplane, he'd restore it. It was a super collection. And unfortunately, when he got killed, that was the end of it.
Speaking of Orange County Airport, this one's not on my list, but the Lions Air Museum on the other side of Orange County Airport, is that still there?
I don't know. I haven't heard of that in years.
Okay, because I went there, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that, I think. And it was relatively new at the time, but it was sparsely visited. It was quite a collection. It was pretty amazing. So that was LYONS. I haven't Googled that to see if that's still around. I've never seen advertising for it. Another one is, who remembers Old McDonald's farm in Mission Viejo, not at Knott's Berry Farm, but after they were concession at Knott's Berry Farm, when Fiesta Village was built, they moved out. It became the animal school at Knott's, and they moved to Mission Viejo, right at a freeway off-ramp. There were lawsuits and stuff, and I don't know whatever came of that, but I don't think it lasted very long. But it was its own little park for a while. Then there was the Buffalo Ranch in Corona del Mar.
Real buffalo?
What's that?
Real buffalo?
Real buffalo. Opened in 1955. And here I'll put in an ad for my website, Yesterland. If you go to Yesterland and then go to the main page of yesterland.com and search for the word buffalo, you will find a link to the Buffalo Ranch. And there's historic photos from the Orange County Archives there. And you can read about the history of the Buffalo Ranch and how long it lasted and what became of it. Let's see, I have one more on my list, and this one way predates me, because this is, we're talking at the beginning of the 20th century, the Joy Zone in Seal Beach. And I know we didn't go into all the other amusement parks that were along the coast, but that's when the only thing I know about it is reading an article that Chris Jepson wrote at his Orange County History blog. And it had a big roller coaster and everything. And it just seems to me that it's the most forgotten amusement park of Southern California ever.
Yeah, I hadn't even heard of that one. Yeah, it's interesting. I have all these pictures. I have pictures of so many small not theme parks, amusement parks around Southern California of kids riding, the little cars that go around, the little boats that go around. It seemed like most of these things went in circles. But the people that, took the pictures never labeled them. So there's pictures of kids on this park or this. And I don't have any idea where they were because I didn't live out here in 1955 or whenever these were taken. So that's like I said, I wish people would label their stuff so it'd make it easier to know where it was. But all these vanished little parks that were gone all over the place.
And
Walt,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Kendall?
Walt Disney used to go to some little amusement park. It was like on La Cienega or something.
Oh,
Yeah.
Before he
that's
opened
Beverly.
Disneyland, and
Beverly.
he'd go out there and talk to this guy all the time and pick his brain about amusement parks. Eventually, I think he joined up with Disney for a while when Disneyland opened, but I'm not sure about that. But he would go out there, and this guy would talk to Walt, and I
We
don't
went
know
there
what
when-
it was called. Go ahead.
To say we went there when we were children, when I was a child, and I think they had a horseback ride there as well, right
Okay.
next to the rides. But I
Huh.
was there many times.
I never saw it, but Walt evidently was always picking his brain, and Walt also went out to Knott's Berry Farm. Actually, there's a lot of Knott's Berry Farm at Frontierland Disneyland, even now, but that was a big thing too he'd do.
Bill,
Yeah,
I have
Beverly
a question. Oh, Bill, I
Yes.
have a question for you. When you were showing Corriganville, that reminded me of something that I had fun doing back in the 90s, I guess it was, seeing the different filming locations that existed in and around the Los Angeles area. And I mean up in the hills, like Iversonville, Vasquez Rocks, and I know there were others. Have you ever thought, or have you done a talk on that type of a thing?
No, that's something to think about. It's actually really interesting when, Kathy's mentioning the different filming locations. When I first got out here, as I mentioned, I came out here from New York in '76, and I worked at Disney. We had a road rally club, and one of the great things was they took you all sorts of places that you would not normally go to. And we came driving out to Chatsworth, and I see all these giant boulders. I said, "Oh, I recognize all those rocks from the different movies and that." So started looking into where some of them were, and some of these places have been built over. Like a lot of the ranch areas have now become housing, but there's this one big, massive, multi-million-dollar housing complex up here where Iverson Ranch was. And Carol and I went up into it just when they were building it. And people, "Oh, you're looking to buy a house?" "Oh, yeah, sure we are." Just so we could drive through it, go, take a look and get into that hallowed ground. Doing LAPD patrols, it's kind of interesting because right now different people, you get a call, so and such is here, so and such is there, but you'll get somebody that's new to the area and a call come out about there's a prowler in ET Park, and the people say, "Where on earth is ET Park? There's no town park named ET Park." Well, it's up in Porter Ranch. It's the park where they filmed ET, and we all know it as ET Park. So somebody new transfers into the division, you have to explain to them where ET Park is. Then here, right in Granada Hills, where we live, is White Oak Avenue, where the scene where Elliot and the kids flying the bicycles over the FBI agents as they, going off in their first thing. So I could look into doing a them and now sort of thing. Vasquez Rocks, of course, is great, for the Zorro, Star Trek, Lost in Space, all the things that were done out there. So there are people who do have websites that they can actually match up the exact angle and shot and everything. It's kind of fascinating to see things that you just take for granted. You go by every day, and other people, "Oh my God, that's the Holy Grail. That's ET Street." Yeah, that's the street I used to go to work. You just don't think about it.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Rich Barnes here. I've got a couple of stories. We stayed at the Century Plaza Hotel the first week it was opened, and looked out over this 20th Century Fox studio back lot. And the studios, and that's where they shot the final scene of Hello, Dolly. A huge outdoor set with a train and everything. And you could walk around it after the movie was shot, but before they tore it down. And
that set was there for a long period of time. I forget what year. Mike and I went over to Fox when we were doing our Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea articles, and they let us take they had a smaller 4-foot sea view. They let us take it out of storage, walk across to a soundstage, and take pictures of it. I kept thinking, boy, this would fit my car really well. But the whole Hello Dolly thing was still, the overhead train was still there.
Right.
They still had billboards off to the side, that were, it was really a fascinaning thing to go walking through that area.
yeah, well, the other story I have is that my ex-wife's father worked at a Mitsubishi plant in Japan during World War II. And when we got married, he came over from Japan. He wanted to see, they have a Japanese Zero at the Plains of Fame Museum. And it's the only one, and I guess it still exists. It's in fine condition. But he wanted to see that because he had actually worked on it, the plant where they built the planes during the war.
Yeah, Carol knows I'm a big World War II fan. I've got a World War II plane, and anytime we see a museum, that and steam trains, the two of them, you know, we're on vacation, must divert. But yeah, that's the only flying Japanese Zero with its original engine out there. So great plane. Yeah, Plains of Fame. I mean, so many of these places, you know, they're just astonishing places to go to, but not when it's hot.
Also, when in the 60s, when I was in LA, got to walk through stage 2, a lot of Mary Poppins, Cherry G. Lane set.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, it was really neat. It's pretty cool. It was after the movie was made, but before they tore the set down.
Where was that?
It was stage 2 at the studio, I believe.
At Disney.
Oh,
Yeah.
at Disney.
Yeah, right.
Sound stage, yeah.
Stage 2, by the way, is a very important sound stage for very many reasons. But that happens to be the stage I met Carol on.
Oh.
Well, originally it had water in it. And it was actually used during when they fought the giant octopus scene that was shot on a stage there in stage 2, full of water.
Yep. Years ago,
they built part of Disneyland. They used one of those sound stages to build things for Disneyland.
Well, most of the sound stages, yeah, they built the river boats, they built all sorts of things, the trains, and they put them on. You might get a kick out of this, Rich. I was at home one night and the phone rings, and it was somebody from Disney Publicity on the phone. And I said, Eisner's giving a speech and he's on stage 2. He's there for his college alumni group. And somebody asked what was shot in that stage, and he doesn't know, and he wants to work into his speech. What was shot on stage 2? I said, well, why are you calling me? Why don't you call Dave Smith? And they said, Dave didn't answer his phone. We have you as his backup. So I said, oh, okay. So wow. Stage 2. And I'm thinking to myself, I could have a lot of fun with this. Well, that's where they did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. That's what, you know, I figured, no, I want to continue to work for Disney. So, that's where they did this. And I gave a whole bunch of names to it. Now there's a plaque outside of each of the stages listing where those things, you know, what was done there. But I remember getting that call thinking, oh, I could have so much fun with this one.
With Marineland, I was working up in Palos Verdes when Marineland was taken away, and it was a publishing company called Hardcore Brace.
Yep.
And they I guess owned a SeaWorld. Yep. And this guy, he told the employees like 2 days before, oh yeah, we're gonna fix this, we're gonna keep it going. And some night, like he came in at night, in the middle of the night, and he came in and he bulldozed and he took all the fish and everything. And then the next day he announced to all those employees, well, you're fired, that the park is closed.
Yeah,
so
it was
he gave them no 2-week notice or anything. He just took it all away. And as I understand it, they took, was it Bubbles, the whale? They're going to I think they put Bubbles back.
Yeah, that was the entrance sign. Yeah. Yeah, that was a huge scandal. It was a real disappointment because it was there one day, and as Kendall said, it was gone the next day. They literally, everybody came, and even the keepers that took care of the animals had no idea that when they went home that day, that was the last time they'd ever see. And some of these people had worked with these whales for 10, 20 years.
Right.
And the next thing you know, they're just gone. Yeah.
That was gone with the wind.
Yep.
And everybody in PB was so upset, and they had articles in the LA Times magazine about it, and there wasn't much anybody could do about it. And some people were trying to work to bring it back, but it was going to be so expensive. They were going to have to get new animals, and it just wasn't feasible for anyone to bring it back.
Yeah. Now, somebody asked if there's any other endangered theme parks, and out here these days with the virus, yeah, all of them. It's I think most of the parks we have out here today are pretty, substantial. I mean, you have big companies behind, obviously Disneyland or Knott's or that sort of thing. But it's so many things. I mean, in New York, I just saw the Tenement Museum just closed and laid off 76 people. For some of these operations, you just wonder, how long you keep going without anybody able to come.
Wasn't there somebody mauled at the Lion Country Safari? somebody got killed or was mauled badly. One of the reasons why they had to shut it down.
Yeah, well, I think somebody climbed into the place and went in there at night and got hurt. But the major thing, it just became real expensive to operate. You can imagine the insurance on it. And somebody comes by and says, "Hey, I'd like to build 100,000 homes out here. How would you like this bucket of money?" And that's what happened to Movie Land. That's what happened to Movie World. Again, if you're make up some number, $100,000 a year profit, which is nice money, and you make it, and some guy comes by and says, "I'll give you $7 million for the land." Hell yeah. And it's land was what killed almost all these things.
I think there was a problem with the unstable land in that area as well.
Well, for Marineland, yeah, not for Lion Country Safari.
Oh, I meant Marineland. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Might have been. I don't know. All I know is Palos Verdes was up in arms about it. It was horrible. It was really horrible.
Now, let's see. Somebody mentioned a Paramount Ranch film location. Yeah, we were out there a number of years ago. Carol and I took the kids out for a picnic, and all the buildings were still out there from the Dr. Quinn Medicine, woman show, and that, of course, burned down a huge fire, and now they're trying to rebuild some of it. But we had all these great movie ranches. If you go out to Malibu Creek State Park, that was the 20th Century Fox Ranch, and the parking lot out there was where a huge tank was that did all the big naval battles from things like Tora. So today you drive out there. Well, it's where they did MASH, all the scenes for the TV show. But you drive out there, park in this parking lot at Malibu, State Park, and you're actually in the Pearl Harbor tank from Tora. Things you just don't realize. Paula asked to have anything in the Roy Rogers Museum when it was in Victorville. No, I never saw any reason to stop in Victorville. It was always a place to go through on the way to Las Vegas or to go through on the way home from Las Vegas. But I never went out to the Roy Rogers Museum. I know he did have Trigger stuffed out there.
He had Trigger, he had Buttercup, he had Rin Tin Tin. I think he had the son of Trigger stuffed out there.
That just
Trigger was sold off to some guy, and Trigger is now in this guy's mansion.
It just seems kind of ghoulisome to me. I don't know. It's like, I can't imagine when, anything happens to my dog, I'm going to stuff my dog and stick it at the side of the couch.
I think Trigger was on it.
They had the saddle that Dale Evans rode around on. It was a plastic saddle that she rode Buttercup with. They had some of his saddles. They had a lot of stuff. I never saw it, but this is what I've heard.
I think that they put the Trigger onto a rose float a couple of years ago.
Yes, they did.
Oh, really? Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's right. I remember it was about 4 or 5 years ago. There was a Western themed float for some reason. They actually took the real Trigger and put him on it.
Yeah, he's still around.
Yeah, it's speaking about stuffed dogs, I remember this kind of silly story, but about a stuffed dog. Somebody came in, she had been at a job interview, and we were at Warner Brothers, and she came in for a job interview really, really shook. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she goes, "I just went over and interviewed for a job with the people that do all the Benji movies." And she said she walked in and she was really impressed. There was Benji sitting in the sun on the other side of the room, just enjoying himself. And in the middle of the interview, she said something like, "Boy, that dog likes to sleep a lot, doesn't it?" And the guy got up and says, "That damn dog in my office again." Got up and picked up the dog and kicked it all the way across the office and bounced off the wall. And she was horrified that this guy had just kicked the dog. And he goes, "That's the stuffed dog we use as its lighting dummy, But she was convinced this guy had just drop kicked Benji across the office. She decided not to work for him. But the guy says, "Yeah, I love doing that," because I was wondering how long it took you to notice him. So just one of those crazy Hollywood stories.
Benji the dog, I was at Disneyland, and one of the morning shows were out there. This was in the 80s, a long time ago, and they were filming at Disneyland. So I went and watched. They had seats set up and everything, and one of the people that were on there was the guy that trained Benji, and he carried that dog around in a little satchel. The kind of thing you'd carry for your clothes for the gym or something. And then when it was time for the dog to come out, he would open the satchel and he would take the dog out. But he always carried him around in a little satchel. It was really weird. Really
Well,
weird.
it's a good thing he was doing dogs and not elephants.
Yeah, or horses.
Yeah. Actual Bubbles, the pilot whale, wound up at SeaWorld San Diego. Yeah, the actual whale ended up down at SeaWorld, but there was a giant statue of him or he, she,
It was
whatever.
the statue
jumping.
they put back. I think
right.
they put it back up. I haven't gone over there to look. I live right near there, but
Yeah, if anybody does come out here to visit, you ought to drive that area because there's a section of roads called Portuguese Bend.
oh, it's falling apart.
The whole road is just insane because all the hills have collapsed over the years. And then down below, you can see where buildings used to be, that they used to be on this side of the road, and now they fell on the other side of the road into the ocean area.
And they used to have the Dominator. Was that the name of the boat?
Yeah, with scuba diving on that. It was a boat that
crashed. And it was, when I was, a kid, you could actually see it. I was a teenager. And now you can't see it anymore. So much stuff has fallen into the sea there. But yeah, you go along there still, and it's real iffy because they've got it all, it's real downhill and uphill, and all the houses that used to be up there are down the ocean. It's real iffy place. So
Bill?
Yeah.
Is the glass church still there? Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
That used to be a big attraction.
The Wayfarer Chapel?
I don't know if it slipped into the sea or not.
No, it's still there, I believe.
You can still get married there. It's a lot of money.
It's still there. Steve and I got married there, Brock.
Hey!
Oh, that's right. You did. I remember that.
That's right. I remember seeing the little plaque on it. Yeah.
I didn't get a vote. Steve kind of just told me with the proposal that that's where we were getting married.
Okay.
Could have been worse. You could have said it was going to be the Golden Horseshoe or something.
Another thing
I would
about
want to get married there.
Yeah, Dave. You're muted, Dave. There you go.
There we go. So stage 3 on the Disney lot is where 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was photographed. It has a huge, or had a huge tank as part of it. And I spent 11 months of my career there because that's where the movie The Black Hole was photographed. And we built a special camera, computer-controlled camera to do that. But stage 2 is actually another very large stage. And it could well be that the sets for Mary Poppins, that they used it for Mary Poppins. That was before I started at the studio, so.
Yeah,
I shot there too.
Yeah, stage 2. Well, if we went over, they've renumbered some of them now, but yeah, as you mentioned, they had the tank for the squid battle over there. We also did a big scene there for, was it the last flight of Noah's Ark? They took a actual B-29. They didn't know there were any B-29s still flying, and they found one that they could fly and do the aerial scenes. But then they got parts from the Navy of a real B-29 that they could use over in Florida on the beach at Kauai, and a third one that they took and turned upside down, made a raft, and did it on the same 20K tank. And I was really frustrated because part of their agreement with the Navy was that they would destroy all these pieces of these B-29s at the end of the filming. And being an airplane nut, I was just like, can't I take to like the altimeter home or something? Nope, all had to go get dumped in the ocean. It was real frustrating. But that was one of the few times they had opened up that tank since the 20,000 Leagues time, and they filled it up with water, and people, oh my God, the pumps still work and everything. Yeah, I remember going out to that stage and watching Dave Snyder working out there on the, what was the Aces? Was that the camera system?
Aces, right.
Yeah, working out there, watching all the models, the Cygnus and the other stuff being done out there. That was fantastic model work.
That tank was, I want to say it was 10 or 12 feet deep by maybe 40 feet square. I mean, it was covered over, and they had support so that you could work on the stage. You didn't realize that there was a tank underneath. But one of the reasons the camera was built there was the 68-foot track actually dead end at the edge of the soundstage, at the edge of the tank. So you could actually cantilever over. We never did use it for underwater work, but you could have.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why there's an aerial cable between stage 2 and 3, I think it is? I was walking there with Steve last year, I think it is, and there's a very thick cable that runs across the 2 stages for no apparent reason.
Power. I believe that's the power cable that runs between them.
I didn't think it was power. It just looked structural. It didn't look electrical. It didn't, I didn't know what it was for.
Because I know they used to have these generators. They used to be called Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and they would bring them in and they would plug them into that the power cables that ran between the stages. Whenever they needed a massive amount of power in one particular building, they could plug in the Huey, Dewey, or Louie generators outside and not draw it off the power grid. Because when they did the Darby O'Gill, they had actually used so much lighting that they ended up causing power problems for the city of Burbank. So the city said, don't ever do that again. So they kind of put in this auxiliary grid of power that they could temporarily tap into and wire things around. So I know that at least one of those generators is still at the studio, but there used to be 3 of them.
And one more thing, Bill, this may be a total lie, insider story. My parents used to live relatively near the Japanese deer park. But one of the reasons we heard that it closed is the deer got sick. There was some horrible disease that went through. And one morning, really early, I think my dad saw it, just flatbed trucks of dead deer being shipped out of that park.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. I was when I was doing the research on this, they were saying basically they think the owners of it poisoned the deer on purpose as an excuse to be able to shut it down and sell it off for the land. So they said that the number of people said the deer are actually healthy, the owners killed them, and that people were able to step in and save the last of the deer from being done in. But yeah, there was a massive extermination of them. And if you go onto old newspaper archival sites, they talk about exactly what you said. You know, people looking over and seeing a truck with 100 dead deer driving down the 5. So,
Oh my God.
yeah. I mean, it's like Marineland. Let's take all the animals out and sell off the land. If you announce you're going to do it, somebody's going to stop you. But if they said, oh, these poor animals were all sick, and I forget what disease they said they had, but they basically said that they went and killed a bunch of them, and the others are found not to have this disease at all. So kind of a sad ending to all the deer.
Did you ever hear about Pacific Ocean Park? They found one of the statues or dummies in one of the rides was actually a dead body.
Was that Pacific Ocean Park, or was that
was
the Pike? The Pike.
Well, maybe it was I don't know. It was one of them.
Yeah, it was a guy named McCurdy. It's funny the things you remember. They were doing a renovation of a ride, and there was a fun house where the guy would jump out and scare you and come out, scare you. And they went and moved the guy, and the arm fell off, and they realized it was an arm of a real person. It wasn't a dummy all this time. And this guy had been killed in, I forget if he was hung or killed in a gun battle or something, but he had been put on display and taken around the West that you could see Frank McCurdy, or what I think that was his name. That this guy had been killed in a gun battle, or the famous outlaw Frank McCurdy, and they would take him to county fairs and put him on display. And at some point, somebody bought McCurdy, put him out in the fun house, and had been there for years. And people came and painted him over when he was looking a little pale, and they would change his clothes and everything. And people totally forgot this was a real guy until his arm fell off. So.
Yeah, actually, my wife and I travel Route 66, one of our hobbies, and we visited his grave last time we traveled. They took him back to where he died, and they've got a grave, and tell us a whole story about the guy who traveled all over the country after he died. Frank McCurdy tells his whole story, but yeah, he died in a gun battle. It was either the last train robbery, or the last bank robbery of that town.
Scott, the things you remember is poor Carol knows I won't remember. Have you remembered to do that little churro that I asked you? No, but then you can remember. Oh, Frank McCurdy, train robber. It's weird how your brain works.
I didn't know his name.
No, for all of us that worked at Disney, though, it was just a thing. They reopened up down in Florida the Mexico ride, and they had repurposed some of the figures from Mickey Mouse Review. And Jose Carioca, very first day the park reopens, Jose falls over, and they had to take him out and everything. And the thing is, bad enough we have to go do an emergency AAA figure removal or repair. Can you imagine the guys at the Pike when you realize there's bones sticking out of your funhouse figure. Ugh.
Oh God!
Why didn't you cover the new Pike?
I didn't have any good pictures of it myself. Basically, what I try to do on these talks is use pictures I have my own collection that are not going to be something you could easily go find on the internet. So I could go and do stuff like the Pike, or I could go and pick some stuff out of other things. But I try to come up with something unique, that you wouldn't just generally find. Like the pictures, like the chariot from Lost in Space. I think I put that on a Lost in Space site one time, and all these people, my God, holy ground, holy ground. So I just try to make things a little bit more interesting.
Bill, I'm curious. You mentioned what was the park again? Sorry, let me actually take a note. The movie ranch that you talked about earlier, Corriganville. Was that once upon a time in Hollywood? You said.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
they rebuilt the Span Ranch out there, and they had to build. They built all the buildings, but then they had to take them back out at the end of the filming again. But if anybody gets to this area, like Debbie, have you ever been out to Corriganville?
No, but I think Steve pointed it out when we drove by, and he said we should go there. But I didn't know you could actually drive around there.
You can't drive around. You park right at the entrance and walk in. And like I took the Cub Scouts out there and stuff. It's really a great walk. You can go quite a distance. And actually, there's a wildlife tunnel that goes underneath the 118 up to the upper part of it. You can take quite a hike up there. But it's really neat because they had like a scene where in one movie, I forget the name of the movie, somebody rides a horse and he jumps off a cliff into a lake down below. Well, the fake cliff they built is still there. The fake lake is down below. It's dry now. But they have a picture of the guy and the horse going off the cliff. They have pictures of various odds and ends. And it's just really neat. There's a really nice oak forest out there. And it's just kind of a fun spot to go to.
You didn't, well, I don't know why you would mention it because it never got off the ground really. But Walt Disney was going to put in some ski resort. What was it called?
Oh, yeah, Mineral King.
Or something?
Yeah.
And the whole little place is still there. They're not doing anything with it. I mean, he bought someplace that was already built up, and he was going to make it into a Disney thing. And just before he died, they had a big press conference and everything. And then when he passed away, Disney decided, we aren't going to do this. And they gave up on the idea.
They ran into a huge problem with the Sierra Club and other environmentalists. So basically, if you've been to Mineral King, Carol and I drove out there a number of years ago. It's a terrible sort of ride up through the middle of nowhere, and you get out there, and it's a beautiful area. But they were going to have to put a major ass road in to get people in and out of there, which was going to devastate it. So the company just decided.
Well, they also wanted to do a park.
Yeah, they wanted to do a park out there, and that's where Country Bears actually came from. They were going to be out there at Mineral King, and there's a audio tape out there of a different sort of soundtrack for they had said this is what the Country Bears could be. But if you get out there, there's actually a kind of interesting thing. If you get out to Mineral King, and it's a beautiful area, they have signs warning you that don't be gone from your car for too long because animals will come under your car and eat your wiring and your hoses. And there's some particular type of rodent out there that just loves the hoses in cars. And they have constant problems with them climbing up underneath cars, eating. So you can imagine you go out for a nice day, you go for a hike, you come back, and your radiator hose is gone. So we didn't spend a lot of time at Mineral King, but it's a really pretty area. Were you out there for the company, Rich?
Well, I got in.
Sorry, we lost your audio there.
Hello, Lake
Yeah,
Independent.
okay.
Yeah, in the late 70s, Disney wanted to build a ski resort there, but they couldn't get it approved either.
Yeah, this thing about tearing out pristine wilderness is probably not looked upon kindly these days.
The one
I
wonder
worked on
about
that
is
Independence Lake project.
If we had built Disney's America with today's environment, what would have happened?
Yeah. Well, you certainly wouldn't have had Confederate land. Yeah, it would be very interesting. The whole thing with did any of you guys work on Disney's America?
Where was that?
It was going to be in Virginia.
Oh no, I never heard.
Yeah, I did.
I worked on it with Bob Weiss.
Yeah, it looked like it had some real potential, but I mean, I don't know how much it would have ever really worked for the particular area, because it certainly is not the easiest place to get to or to do anything. And, I always wondered how serious the company entirely was on doing that, but I guess they spent a bunch of money on it. So must have been more serious than I thought.
Oh, they were serious. Believe me.
Yeah.
The land that they didn't buy that they had optioned, and so we could get final approval, they ended up donating to the Boy Scouts when they pulled out.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't
And
that
it's
very
now a
near?
big, gigantic housing development.
Wasn't
Yeah.
that very near a Civil War battlefield? I think that was one of the big problems.
Now that's what the rich people in Washington who own land over in the next valley. This was a not in my backyard protest.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope folks enjoyed our tour around Southern California. You didn't hit any potholes. We didn't have any traffic jams. I was lucky when I got out here. A bunch of the things were still out here, so you could still go and see the remnants. So some of them were still going. Like I hit Movie Land in its last month of operation, or Movie World rather. Carol and I got to go to, and Carol, you'd gone to Santa's Village before as a kid, right?
Probably we bought the house up at Lake Arrowhead when I was 13. So I imagine as a teenager maybe. But then it closed down. But then my dad and I used to walk from our house all the way over there.
Yeah.
When it was closed. And so I don't remember. I assume I did. And also Pacific Ocean Park, my memory was that the entrance was wonderful. And then as soon as you got out of the elevator or the whatever it's called, the one that submerged you supposedly, it was just a regular amusement park.
Yeah. For the people that went to Pacific Ocean, it was like a cult thing. I mean, people just talk about it religiously, and you wonder if it would live as well. If they were able to go back today, if it would live up to people's memories of that. But as Carol mentioned, what happened when you got there, you were going into the underwater world. So they had a fake, like we had the hydrolators at Epcot, same sort of thing. You'd go in, they take you down, and then you'd walk out. You'd, of course, never have actually gone anywhere. But there was the park out there.
Did you know that Lawrence Welk started at Pacific Ocean Park? They had a theater there, and he was doing his show, and that's how Lawrence Welk got started. And I guess some TV station thought he was great and picked him up, and he started to do it on TV. But he was there at Pacific Ocean Park. You could go see him.
Well,
that's what I've heard.
I wouldn't go see him, but that's.
Well, no, I wouldn't either, but a lot of people really loved him. He was quite popular out there.
Oh, yeah.
It was the Aragon Ballroom.
Yes, I actually have pictures of the Aragon Ballroom. I was running out of, I didn't want to make this thing go on for 2 weeks or anything, but I do have a picture of somebody standing outside the Aragon Ballroom now that you mention it, Glenn.
I have a question for you, Bill. When we're talking about animal parks, you know what happened to the Alligator Farm that was across from Knott's Berry Farm?
No, it's funny. I don't have any pictures of that, and I don't know the details of when that was there, when it was gone. It's actually interesting in some of these things trying to find the history of when they opened or when they closed, because some of them just opened as like somebody's backyard operation, and then it became bigger and bigger, like the Bernheimer thing. What year did he first actually let people go onto his garden? What was his backyard? You have to try to research some of that. But the Alligator Farm, no, I've seen pictures of it. I've seen mention of it, but I don't think it was here when I got out here in '76. I think it was gone by then.
Gone.
I know we went there probably in the early '70s when I was living in Cerritos. And it was just filled with alligators, and they would come out and feed them chicken backs, and they would fight over them. And it was a strange place. We only went there once.
We've been to the one in Orlando, and we've got a picture of our daughter proudly holding an alligator in the parking lot. They came up with that baby alligator with the snout all wrapped up in tape or anything. Unfortunately, she found out they didn't tape up the legs, and she ended up with alligator scratches on her legs. But she could go back to school. She was very proud. People like, "What happened to you?" "I was fighting an alligator." So. Yeah, the one in Florida is still there, but the one out here is gone. Dave?
There's close to you is the William S. Hart Ranch
Yeah.
And they used to have, at the top of the hill, they used to have buffalo. So I'm not sure if that's still the case, but that's an interesting, we want to talk about a graveyard with his horses and his dogs, and a lovely house that you, at least there was a tour through there with Russell paintings.
Yeah,
Yeah, there still is. That's still going now. And the buffalo are gone. They talked about them, but the house is still, it's a wonderful place to go see. And, it, you know, he donated to the county of LA because of all the nickels and dimes he made from his movies, from people going to the movies. So he told them they could never charge to go see it.
Yeah, I think the buffalo ended up being put back out on Catalina because it was already a buffalo herd out there, and they wanted to do some rejuvenation of the herd for reproductive purposes. But yeah, the Hart House, Carol and I go to a theater near there and drive by and look at, they've got an old train station they moved over there, and it's a neat spot.
I think I knew somebody that lived in that house. Somebody through Sierra Canyon, one of the parents there lived in the house a long time ago now, but unless I'm mistaken.
But there's so many neat places out here. You could go to the Will Ryder's ranch and see his house up there, and it's again the nice part. I didn't put some of those places there because they were still there today, but it's just kind of neat when you go out there and think that's where all these people were, and his house is a great state park now.
You can go through William S. Hart's house. I think it's in Los Angeles somewhere.
Yes,
all of his possessions.
It's in
He
Santa
was good friends
Clarita.
with Charles Russell, the artist, and there's all sorts of Charles Russell artwork all over the house.
Yeah, it's right near us, about
Yeah.
10 miles from us. So, and there's all sorts of other fun places. There's a place not too far from us called Beale's Cut. It's if you ever see a scene in a movie where somebody's jumping this huge horse across this divide, basically you had the mountains between our valley and the Santa Clarita Valley, and nobody could get their wagons up over it. So this guy Beale was an army engineer, and they hired a whole bunch of Chinese to come, and they built this tiny little cut between the mountains, and all of a sudden it was the route to get between here and Santa Clarita. And for years and years it was there. Then they built a 14 and it goes right through it. But the Beale's Cut is right off to the side. And they used to have this really nice marker telling you what it was there. And then people stole it because they can melt that down for brass, But over the years, a lot of Beale's Cut is filled in with the, land is fallen in for rainstorms or whatever. But, that's again, maybe 8-10 miles tops from the house. So we live right where the aqueduct came in from when Mulholland built his aqueduct. That's 3 miles from the house. Again, big brass plaque. Now there's a big rock because somebody stole a plaque off of that. So it's disappointing to see all these things that were historical that the vandals just ripped to pieces because they can melt stuff down. So, well, thanks everybody for joining. Next week we'll be visiting Disneyland again, the happiest place on earth. And you do not have to wear a mask. So I hope everybody has a nice day. I hope on the East Coast for Jim and you others back there, it cools off a little and doesn't stay as horrifically hot and miserable as it's been.
Hey, Bill, before you go,
yeah,
would
Wayne.
you identify your background today?
Oh, yes. I am at the corner of Hollywood and Vine. I'm waiting to be discovered. So, yeah, if I move over to the side, the road sign there at Hollywood and Vine. This was 1965, Hollywood and Vine. We were talking at the beginning of the talk, back when airlines had things like downtown ticket counters and things like that. So this is beautiful downtown Hollywood. I actually worked about a block away from there for a couple of years, and it looks very different. But Hollywood and Vine, Sunset and Vine, all the tourists coming out, they got to go there, and it's just an intersection. So I just thought it was fun to go back, and it was enough of a thing that people were taking vacation photos to show that they were at the American Airlines office at Hollywood and Vine. Okay, well,
thank you much.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Oh, and
Yeah.
Leslie, before we go, Leslie, just so you know, this afternoon I'm going out to get an ice cream. I like to joke with Leslie. She's always posting pictures of herself at Disneyland or all these places eating ice cream. So I live vicariously. I mean, she's had some big honking ice creams at the one that was down in Hollywood. I mean, it was like the size of the town I grew up in, and she's got the scoop and she's ready to go. So how she stays in shape, I don't know, but I'm going off for an ice cream today. So I thought I'd mention it.
Have fun.
Yeah.
I'll be
Enjoy
thinking
and
of
thank
you.
you.
Thank
Great.
you, Bill.
Take care.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you.